Thanks so much, Camilla. And yeah, as Camilla said, my name's Dan. I'm living in Stockholm at the moment, but I'm originally from Australia. Running a company called 100 Point Challenge, and we're going to be running the session today in two different parts. So firstly, I'm just going to go through a bit of a presentation on how to build culture in a remote setting, and then the second part of the session is more interactive. We're going to play a game called The Puzzle together. It's a team-based problem-solving competition. So that's how the session's going to run. Feel free to ask questions. If you want to just pop them in the chat, I'll probably just run through the presentation, and then I'll come to the questions at the end. But feel free to put those in the Zoom chat as we go. So a little bit more about me and my experience with remote work. So just to expand a little bit on what Camilla said, basically we started out in 2018 as an outdoor events company, and the company was set up remotely, both by necessity and also by design. So we started off in Stockholm, but we also had the intention that I wanted to build a remote company such that I had the option to move back to Australia or to work from anywhere. I wanted sort of location independence from the outset. But since 2018, we started off building outdoor city experiences in Stockholm. And we actually took that same concept and applied it in multiple cities around the world. So we're operating in 6 different cities across Europe and Australia, and that meant we were managing remote staff across different time zones and needed to have all the processes in place as a company to be operating remotely. Obviously, outdoor events were at the epicenter of the pandemic, and so in April 2020, we basically had to transform our entire business, and we started offering online activities and games to engage remote, hybrid and distributed teams. And so I've had very much firsthand experience as well over the last 18 months working with a lot of different companies in helping them sort of address some of those challenges they're having with engagement and with remote work. So yes, both within the business and for also our customers, I'm heavily involved now in remote work. So a little bit of background, and this you're probably very aware of now, having those of you worked in lockdown for a period of time. There are, of course, some benefits of remote work. So less commuting time, as you can see here in this meme, a bit more freedom and flexibility. As I said, location independence. You can actually live somewhere that's not around the corner from the office if you'd like to. Can potentially save you money, and for some people, I think they've found productivity actually has increased as well. Perhaps if you've had kids at home during the pandemic, slightly different situation perhaps from typical remote work, but could have been slightly more challenging. But for many people, getting some more deep work and productive time at home can be really beneficial. There's also obviously some challenges with remote work, and I think this image on the left sort of exemplifies one of the main things, which is loneliness and a feeling of social isolation that we can all experience when we're working on our own. And the picture on the right here, I guess, is more about motivation and feeling sometimes a little bit less motivated when we're working from home as opposed to sitting alongside our colleagues. But generally, the research has shown that the challenges from remote work come in 3 main categories. So you can think of these as interpersonal challenges, primarily things like how do we collaborate with our colleagues, feelings of isolation, challenges around networking, which are normally not so much of an issue when we meet up in person. There's also psychological well-being factors. So as I mentioned, issues around motivation, potentially burnout. And then there's some environmental factors, and these are probably a little bit more pandemic specific, things like distractions at home and sort of the comfort of your home work environment. So how does that all relate to culture? Well, culture can be a little bit of a fluffy thing to define, but it's really how and why we do things. And in the end, it's determined by people. And so all those factors I mentioned, the challenges on the previous slide, they're all related to people. So these two really come together in that way. It's a a matter of interpersonal relationships in terms of how and why we're doing things. Culture is, as you would have experienced, what makes your team or an organization unique, and it can both attract us towards a team or organization as well as repel us, depending on what we feel about the culture. And these are a couple of quotes here I think summarized sort of culture pretty well. One from Brian Chesky at Airbnb: culture is a shared way of doing something with passion. And this other one from GitLab, one of the leading remote companies: it's a barometer of how well values are adhered to and reinforced in the organization. And when it comes to culture and people, engagement is really important. And so research has shown that people who say they feel part of a team are almost 2.5 times more likely to be fully engaged than those who are not. And as you would have experienced in a work context yourself, your level of engagement is very closely linked to your levels of motivation. A particular challenge with remote work is a concept which psychologists have coined virtual distance. And what they mean by this is a sense of psychological and emotional detachment or disengagement, which is particular to when people only relate to each other via electronic devices. So when you're looking at remote teams and how to build a sense of good culture amongst the team, it's important to really focus on creating those meaningful relationships to reduce this. So focusing on values, trust, and interdependency, as well as a sense of shared context. So that's looking at the who's in the team, the skill mix and personality, and very importantly, communication, how we communicate with each other across the team and organization. So now I wanted to just jump into a few tips and tricks on remote building culture in a remote team. And this is both from our own experience as well as seeing some of our customers who do this really well. So it's important to document your team's principles and values. In a co-located setting in an office, typically culture is picked up tacitly or implicitly. Just we can feel it by being there. But in a remote setting, it's really important that this is actually made explicit by writing it down. In that way, people who are working remotely in the team can actually exemplify the different behaviors and values that you think are important. And it's sort of clear what is expected from the team. They should be made obviously relevant to the individuals within the team or the wider organization, and include different sort of mindsets, behaviors, and skills that are important in the team. And when it comes to remote work, I think one of the key things to do is around onboarding of new team members and making sure they're brought up to speed with the values in the team and sort of discussed with the existing team members to make sure that they're not sort of coming in cold into an environment remotely and feeling a little bit displaced. So one company we've worked with, as I just mentioned, really probably one of the leading companies who are remote only is GitLab. And they do this really well. So they have a whole handbook dedicated to remote work. And in that, one whole chapter is dedicated to the company's values. And what they do to sort of make sure these are not just written down and then not passed along is they spend a lot of time during the onboarding process going through these with the new hires and within the team, and they look at sort of what the values are and how they can enact those values within their individual teams. It's also important to define how you work. So things like that you would typically take for granted, sort of informal meetings in the office or when you're going to meet up and so on. Processes around giving feedback and different communication channels. It's really important for everyone in the team to know sort of what's the best practice, how you should be doing these different things together as a team. And it should, again, it's really important this is documented and written down so that people have access to it, so they know how they should be communicating within the team. A company we've worked with, Klarna, a very famous Swedish company who's doing this really well, works with Agile, and they're growing incredibly quickly. I think they've gone from around 2,000 to 4,000 staff over the last couple of years. Majority of that has been done remote. And so they have a bunch of things they do, daily stand-ups via video conference within the teams. They do retrospectives, as well as these team days in which they solely focus on documenting work processes, how they work together as a team. And we've worked with a bunch of different teams at Klarna during these team days to incorporate a game that focuses on building and strengthening relationships in those teams and communication amongst the team. It's also really important to spend time building relationships informally via scheduling social events, games, and activities. This comes in to replace, what typically in an office would be done informally in the case of maybe a fika in Sweden or an after-work beer in probably more typical in Australia. But in a remote context with a team, it's important that regular social activities are scheduled in order to foster those genuine connections amongst people and build trust amongst the team. Social activities are really good for people's well-being as well. Anticipation of reward when it comes to games and sense of achievement is a dopamine regulator, and studies have shown that that games actually help reduce people's stress as well as being great for team bonding. The best customers we've worked with over the last 18 months or so, we can see that they really structure their fun and they make this a regular touch point for their employees. So one big difference compared to sort of in-person interaction with remote teams is one-to-one communication is pretty fine, as we would have all experienced in a remote setting in a video call, but it can be quite difficult when it comes to group interaction. And so it's really good if you have some sort of structure around some sort of game or activity that people can sort of play to help with that sort of informal interaction. So for example, Spotify have a social club, which is led by team members who find particular games and activities to get together with the entire team on a regular basis. We've also worked with Moz, which is a Seattle-based SEO marketing company. Their chief of Happy, which is amongst other things, she's dedicated to finding games for them to do and runs some of our problem-solving games for different employees of theirs based across different parts of the organization. We've also worked regularly with ING in Ireland, who have a monthly after work, more of a get together where they play games. Being Irish, there's often some drinking involved as well, but they make sure this is done on a regular monthly basis. And that's something that's really important to make sure that time is scheduled for people. It's also important to share knowledge and learn together, as we do in office environments. So things like virtual breakfasts, lunch and learns, or group training days. And these can be led internally by team members or by external guests, or both. Another company we've worked with who we've seen doing this really well is Atlassian. They've had several of these virtual get-together, these training days. One of their core values at Atlassian is play as a team. And so for them, putting in some different games and activities to break up a schedule of training is a great way to enact some of those values. And we've worked with them both in Australia and the Philippines, as well as US and Europe, to sort of have these cross-border interactions amongst the team. It's also really important to celebrate and recognize people, as we would do in office environment. So make time for celebrations, things like birthdays and weddings and work anniversaries and so on. Again, typically you would expect some kind of birthday cake or get together in the office. It's important to still make time to do this virtually. You can send something to someone's house, make them feel appreciated. We all know how important that is as an employee, to feel sort of recognized by your employer and appreciated. Something else we've done internally in 100 Point Challenge is around communication and sort of trying to address this differences in time zones, which can be an issue in terms of getting together with your colleagues. So one thing we've done is send out a weekly video where we just make something personal, share, things that we're doing within the organization, even struggles, we're having or wins we've had, and making them a bit fun and personal. And that's really good when you're working across asynchronous time zones. So we have staff on the west coast of the US, for example, or on the east coast of Australia, and it can be difficult to get together at the same time. So videos can work really well as a way to sort of feel connected to each other. It's also finally important to provide feedback channels. In office, you might take this opportunity to do this with someone, again, in a more informal setting, but it's important to have open feedback available to your staff in a remote setting. So this could be a digital mailbox or an open feedback survey where people can they can give feedback on what's working for them, what isn't working. And so you as a leader of the team can sort of listen and see what adjustments need to be made to make sure you keep everyone in the team happy. That is it for the tips and tricks. So thank you. I'll open it up in case anybody would like to ask any questions.
Hi, Dan. I'll have a question. My name is Sean Rooney. I was just wondering, when it comes to games, is there a favorite trending that you find that works really well, or are all your games built in-house, or are they shared online?
Yeah, so we focus primarily on team problem-solving games, fun team problem-solving games, which work really well for different sizes of groups, because we can split people up into smaller groups, sort of 4 or 5, as you're going to experience, and give them something fun but slightly challenging to work on together. And so we found that format works really well, where it's kept open, so there's no sort of bottlenecks in the game. It's not sequential and can be discussed together, and a little bit competitive. So I think people tend to feel more engaged if they're competing around something as well. So that's what we've focused on internally, is building games that are a little bit fun, but are a little bit intellectual. So you feel like you sort of achieve something together as a team. You get a bit of a sense of achievement working together. And hopefully you get also that aha moment when you sort of piece everything together as a team during the game.
Okay, thank you.
I've just jumped in. My name's Sarah. I am wondering, with the game, since we're on the games theme,
Yep.
are the things that you do completely online with all participants together like we are now for the whole experience, or is there an incorporation of different mediums, if you like, other than just being on video together in a meeting? And the reason I ask, it's a bit of a loaded question, is we spend a lot of time doing this.
Yep.
So how do you break that up?
Yeah, so I mean, from the perspective of how you participate in our online games, they are in this sort of in this setting. You'll see in a minute. I mean, it's not just once you get into your breakout rooms, you'll be looking at content, and then it's about discussing those problems as well. It can be done in terms of how it's run. It can be done hybrid as well. So we have people who actually do the games where they have been at times in the office. There's no reason why you can't look at the content and then discuss it as a team, if you're a team of 4 inside an office environment as well, because it's just a format of delivery of information to you as a team. But yeah, the online, we don't sort of, we have had games actually where we've got you to go away and complete tasks as well in your physical environment. But the game you're going to play today is not that type of game. But we do have experiences which get you to ask you to do something in your local environment and then bring that back to the screen later on as well. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I'm a global board chair of a social enterprise, and we have people from all over the world in our. We're 10 people in our board. Any tips for people that are extremely intelligent, because some people I think that have, you know, double PhDs in design engineering or whatever, you know, they can, I think some people can be a bit up themselves when it comes to the knowledge that they have. And so is there anything that any tips for people that are kind of super intelligent?
It's funny you say that, because we've actually had people from MIT and Harvard come along to play. And early on, when we were designing the games, we sort of had, you know, we started off with one size fits all, and it was clear that these high IQ people needed more of a challenge. So actually, we built one of our games. We built what we call the pro version, which is basically for high IQ, really high functioning teams. So I think that is a challenge, that you know, you need to build games that are specific to the audience, and those people will need harder problems to work on than other people would. So we certainly have that as well, different sort of difficulty levels depending on who the audience is. Just see, Helen had put it, what was the name of the Spotify game? So Spotify have played it. We've got several different games. So they've come to play a few of our different games. They played our Christmas puzzle.
The Hunt, the Puzzle, the Ascent, and the Christmas Puzzle is what they've played. I was just checking whilst you were talking.
Thanks. Great. Well, if there's not any other question, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, me again. I have another question, which is the role of specific individuals or groups within an organisation across those areas of, I guess, tips and advice that you gave. To what extent it works best when it's done sort of top down versus handed over to the fun people, or, you know, what's sort of the best model in your observation from some of the companies that you've worked with, the role of leaders and that type of thing?
Yeah, I think it can work. It can work either way. Either it can be, I mean, we're always working with a different person who sort of bring it in. It can be just a team lead who thinks it's, you know, it's something that their team needs. It can be coming from the top, where leaders have said that I want our different teams to increase their engagement. So let's go ahead and arrange a bunch of activities. And we actually have the option, two different options. You can either have a facilitated event, sort of bring us in as a company to facilitate for you, or we actually have sort of software as a service where you can buy access to the games as well and run them yourself internally. So if you had someone internally who was normally leading events or in organizational development or HR, who typically would do these sorts of things, you could actually put them in charge of leading the games for different teams, and they can take on the role that I'm going to do today as a facilitator. So I think really both different types of approaches do work. Yep.
Dan, can I ask a question? It's Emilia Romeo here. I head up Eric, Australia, New Zealand, and we're trying to do this across 35 countries and 26,000 employees. So we actually were discussing some of this the other day with the leadership team. I guess it's great, it's goodness what you're saying, and we're doing some of that, and thank you for sharing all of that. And I can see that, you know, we've been forced in this situation, and I guess we've adapted, and some of the tips and so on work. The question on my mind is, how long is it sustainable for? And, you know, do you see this the new norm? Or what sort of mix do you see of this versus, you know, the human interaction? Because at the end of the day, we're all social animals, humans, and some of us feel that it's challenging to build culture through a screen, particularly as you bring in new employees on board. You can build a particular culture virtually through the screen, but to build a true culture and the fiber that makes a company, it can be quite challenging to do it remotely. So question is, do you see this as the new norm going forward? Do you see that it's sustainable? How long for? And what sort of mix, if not?
Thanks, Miller. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of companies, I think, are grappling with the same issue at the moment. And I think it's going to be a mix. I think for many organizations are probably going to take a hybrid model. going forward. So there's going to be an element of remote work which is not going away. And I mean, I think that's opened up a lot of opportunities for companies who have employees who sit in different locations. It's a great opportunity to bring those people together. But there's no doubt that that many companies will be really keen to have people get back together, as you say, in person as well. So I really think for a lot of companies, it's going to be a hybrid model going forward. We're hearing more and more about companies who are going remote only, or remote first, as they call themselves, companies. You know, there's more and more of these, particularly in tech. I think they're realizing, you know, the advantages in being able to attract global talent. And for people, employees as well, they're saying that this is what they want. They want more flexibility. They want to be able to work from wherever they want. And so organizations are realizing that in order to attract the best talent, they have to be able to offer remote work environment. So I do think you're still going to, even remote work companies, what they often do at pre-pandemic is they will have, they'll fly, you know, in to get together maybe once a year or something, so that they can still meet in person. So there'll still, I think, be some sort of a hybrid approach, depending on the size of your organization, where your team's located, and your strategy, and so on. It's a moving it's a moving feast as well, as we all know. The pandemic is also dictating somewhat what we can do.
I guess what I'm hoping with to see how will we as organizations, how much of what we used to do in that interaction we will cut back and replace it with this remote culture, remote virtual culture, if you like. How much will we wind back? Because obviously it'll be pretty sad if we go completely one way or the other, I think.
Yeah, no, I think it would be important to have both. But I think it's really important to think about those, having a strategy for building culture in a remote setting. For many people, they are going to stay, it looks like, for quite some time. It's going to be difficult to get people together. So I think companies are going to have strategies in place to make sure people feel a sense of engagement and team for, you know, up until the point when we can get back together more frequently.
Can I just say something? I think I'm an organizational psychologist and OD consultant. And one of the things that I find is that people, especially in Australia, they're very cynical about values. And I think what it's going to do is it's really going to stretch people to really be genuine about the values that they purport in a company. And so you will lose anyone if you're bullshitting about values and you're not caring enough about the people. And this is where I think the games come in. It draws people in, enables you to kind of build the culture a bit with the values that are genuine and that you're practicing all the time. That's just been my experience. Sorry, I'll shut up.
Thanks, Jasmine. No, that's really, and what we found.
Yeah, good point.
It's a great point. It's extremely interesting to watch how different cultures approach these team games as well. We've really noticed that Australians, I mean, they tend to take longer, but I think that's because we're such an informal culture, and we once we get into a breakout room, we like to chat, and, you know, we take our time. Whereas we work with Europeans and people in the US, and they can be really serious, and they're all about getting the job done. How's the most efficient way we can split these tasks up? And so you get a really great insight into how the cultural differences between different nations as well. So I'm cognizant of time, and I would love you to have a quick go at playing one of our games, so you can see a little bit what we do at 100 Point Challenge. So I want to jump straight into that now, and what we're going to do is put you into some breakout rooms, into some teams, and we're going to play a short version of the puzzle. And it's a problem-solving game. As I said, it's a team game and a competition. And the aim of the game is for your team to solve 10 individual puzzles or problems, as well as a master puzzle as quickly as possible. So the master puzzle question is, what did the fourth say? And this will be a little bit cryptic for now, but hopefully it's going to make sense once you get through the game. The rules of the game are the team that solves it most accurately in the least amount of time is the winning team. And we do have some prizes to give out to the winning team. So it is incentivized if you're a competitive person. If your team is stuck with one of the problems, you are actually allowed to ask me for an answer. There is a penalty involved, which I'll get to in a minute. And you can use anything you want to help you solve the puzzle. So feel free to Google. As I mentioned, your score is calculated as follows. So you get a time, which is your finishing time, the time at which you're going to submit your answers to me. And then you get plus 5 minutes if you get an individual puzzle incorrect. You get plus 10 minutes if you can't solve the master puzzle. And you get plus 10 minutes if you ask me for an answer to a puzzle piece, but it still might be worth it towards solving the overall game. So think about your strategy there. Submitting answers, once you get into the game page, which I'll share with you in a minute, you'll see there's a submit answers button in the corner. Only one person from your team needs to submit your team's answers. And just to note that you can't leave any of the fields blank. So if you're not sure what something is, just put in NA or don't know or something in the field. A couple of tips for success: make sure you read the questions carefully, communicate within the team, discuss. You might want to write things down. Some people like using pen and paper for these sorts of games, and use the chat. Once you're in the breakout rooms, that's your private workspace, so you don't need to worry about sharing things or answers with the wider group. Does anybody have any questions?